What if I told you that a simple box of medical plasters, like basic Band-Aids, could sell for 3 to 4 times more in Kenya than it does in China?
I mean, it sounds like a typo in the data, right?
Right. But what if I told you that this very simple, very specific math is quietly redrawing the entire map of global manufacturing?
It really is. We are witnessing a massive structural shift in the global economy, and it's happening largely under the radar.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. We've got a stack of recent reports to go through, including some fresh analysis from The Economist. Our mission today is to unpack this huge trend where Chinese private companies are fleeing domestic competition and just, well, setting up shop in Africa.
And we aren't just going to throw macroeconomic theories at you. We're going to use the story of one specific company to see exactly why this is happening right now.
Yeah, let's jump right into that because I want to look at the ground reality through this one company, Dua Power. They are a family-owned solar energy firm.
A very successful one historically.
Right. For nearly 60 years, they never left China. They had absolutely no reason to. I mean, China's been going through this massive green energy boom. They had domestic orders lined up around the block.
Until very recently.
Yeah, suddenly, in March 2025, they completely shifted gears. They packed up and built their very first overseas factory in Tatu City, which is a special economic zone in Kenya.
It's a huge move for a legacy company like that.
And honestly, I'm getting stuck on the logic here. I thought China was the undisputed king of making green energy tech. Why mess with a 60-year winning streak?
Well, to understand why Dua Power finally left, you have to look at the brutal reality of the Chinese domestic market right now. It's hit a really severe turning point.
How bad are we talking?
Bad enough that industries like solar panels, electric vehicles, steel, they're all trapped in this phenomenon known as involution.
Okay, so involution. That isn't just standard business competition, right?
No, not at all. Involution is, well, simply put, it's what happens when massive amounts of money and companies are trapped in a closed arena fighting for a shrinking piece of the pie.
Okay, so basically, it's like a street where 5 different people open lemonade stands right next to each other.
That's a great way to picture it, yeah.
And they keep dropping their prices, just to steal customers from the stand next door until absolutely nobody is making any money. So Dua Power just looked at the street and decided to move their lemonade stand to a completely different neighborhood.
Exactly. They were slashing prices below the actual cost of production just to outlast the other guy. You generate cash flow, sure, but your profits just vanish. So moving to Africa was simply the rational survival move.
Okay, but let's talk about the scale here, because if it's just one solar company moving to Kenya, that's like a neat anecdote.
Oh, it's definitely not just one company. The data from last year, 2025, is historic. Chinese direct investment in African manufacturing hit a 10-year high. We're talking $12.3 billion.
Wow. $12.3 billion in a single year.
Yeah, funding 64 entirely new, massive industrial projects.
Yeah.
And if you look at the wider window from 2023 to 2025, China actually invested more money into Africa than the U.S. and Europe combined.
Wait, really? More than the U.S. and Europe combined?
Combined.
That completely flips the script. But what's the actual pull? Because, for decades, the standard model was to find the cheapest labor, build a huge factory, and then ship those cheap goods to New York or London.
Right, the traditional export model.
Well,
but this is completely different. They aren't moving to Africa to find cheap labor for Western exports. They are moving there for the local market itself.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the demographics are undeniable. Look at the projections for this year, 2026. Out of the 20 fastest growing economies in the world, 12 of them are in Africa. It's a booming consumer base.
Which brings us right back to the Band-Aids.
Exactly. The medical plasters.
So if the goal is selling locally, the math makes total sense. There's this Chinese entrepreneur in the reports, Charlie Yang.
Right. He set up a medical equipment factory in Kenya.
Yeah, and he pointed out that those simple medical plasters sell for 3 to 4 times more in Kenya than back home. Because normally they have to import all that stuff.
Think about the journey of an imported box of Band-Aids. By the time it gets from a factory in Shenzhen to a pharmacy in Nairobi, you've paid for ocean shipping, customs, tariffs, and like 3 different middlemen.
So by building the factory locally in Tatu City, Charlie Yang and Dua Power are just bypassing that entire bloated chain.
Bypassing it completely.
They save on shipping, but because local demand is huge and the imports are pricey, they can still charge a premium.
And they keep that massive profit margin for themselves. It is a total paradigm shift. The new motto is Made in Africa for Africa.
Made in Africa for Africa. I like that. But, I've been thinking back to the 2010s, and we kind of heard a version of this before, right?
Yeah.
People used to predict that Africa was going to be the next factory of the world.
Oh, absolutely. That was the prevailing theory. As China got richer, Africa would take over all the low-cost export manufacturing.
Right. But it sounds like you're saying that didn't happen.
It didn't. In fact, if we look at the hard data, it's moving in the complete opposite direction.
Wait, manufacturing is shrinking.
It is. Across sub-Saharan Africa, manufacturing made up 18% of the economy back in 1981. By 2024, that had fallen to just 10%.
Are you serious? It almost halved. What about the countries that went all in on industrialization, like Ethiopia? Everyone's calling Ethiopia the China of Africa.
Ethiopia is actually the perfect example of why the old model broke. They built these massive industrial parks specifically to make clothes and shoes to export to the West.
And it failed.
Even there, the manufacturing share of their economy dropped from 6% in 2017 down to 4.4% in 2024.
So why did it fail? If the labor is cheap and the parks are built, what breaks?
The reliance on Western markets. The global trade waters have just become incredibly volatile. To build a factory for global exports, you need extreme predictability.
Oh, right, like trade agreements.
Exactly. Take America's AGOA agreement, the African Growth and Opportunity Act. It lets eligible countries export to the U.S. tax-free.
Sounds great on paper.
On paper, yes. But in reality, its renewal is always uncertain. So if you're a company looking to drop $50 million on a textile plant, and Congress might suspend your tax-free status in 2 years.
You just don't build the factory.
The risk is too high.
So, simply put, aiming to be the factory for the entire world right now is like trying to jump into the Olympics before you've even won a local race. The global waters are just too choppy.
That's spot on. And that's the core realization driving companies like Jua Power. The Made in Africa for Africa model is safe. If you make solar panels in Kenya for Kenyans, you don't care about U.S. tariffs.
You're just serving a predictable local market.
Yeah.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
If I'm a local African business owner, this sounds terrifying. You've got these Chinese giants flooding in, bringing massive capital and tech from surviving their domestic price wars. Aren't they just going to crush the local businesses?
It's a very real concern, and there is definitely friction. We actually saw this play out recently in the steel industry.
Oh, right. The plant in Zimbabwe.
Yes. In 2024, a massive Chinese-owned steel plant opened in Zimbabwe, and it was incredibly efficient.
Let me guess, the older local plants couldn't keep up.
They couldn't. The competition was so fierce, it drove prices down across the whole region. It actually forced older legacy steel operations in neighboring South Africa to shut down completely.
Wow. So it literally wiped out the regional competition. It plays right into the bigger anxiety here. I mean, last year, Africa had a $102 billion trade deficit with China.
$102 billion, yes. That means Africa is importing vastly more than it is exporting to China. It's a huge political friction point.
Which perfectly explains the massive news that just dropped 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Today is May 4th. On May 1st, 2026, the Chinese government officially eliminated tariffs on almost all African imports.
A very timely policy shift.
Right. It seems like a direct attempt to fix that $102 billion gap. Just make it cheaper for Africa to sell stuff back to China.
On a diplomatic level, that's exactly what it is. But we have to be realistic about the mechanics here. This tariff cut will mostly benefit African agricultural exports.
Like coffee and avocados.
Right. It won't instantly fix the manufacturing deficit because Africa simply doesn't have the industrial base yet to mass produce complex goods for the Chinese market.
Okay, so we've got South African steel plants closing, a massive trade deficit. Sounds pretty extractive. But there has to be another side to this. Are these foreign factories purely bad news for local industry?
Not necessarily. The analysis is pretty divided. You have experts like Carlos Oya, he's a political economist, and he argues that these Chinese firms are mostly filling gaps.
Chinese firm isn't destroying local competition.
Exactly. They're actually creating a brand new domestic industry. And with that comes desperately needed jobs, technical training, and new supply chains.
So it's not a hostile takeover, but it's not a perfect partnership either. It's just a really pragmatic, messy evolution.
Driven by absolute necessity on both sides.
Right. Jua Power is the ultimate blueprint here. A solar company realizes they can't win the price war back home, so they take their money and tech to Kenya. They get to tap into the fastest growing consumer base on Earth.
Bypassing the shipping costs and all the global trade drama?
It's brilliant, honestly. But before we wrap up, where does this actually lead?
Well, that's the question I want to leave you with. Right now, these Chinese factories in Africa are focused entirely on selling locally because the profits are so high.
Right, made in Africa for Africa.
But think about this. What happens 10 years from now? When those factories scale up, mature, and eventually do decide to look outward again.
Oh, wow.
When made in Kenya, solar panels and electric vehicles start hitting the global market backed by Chinese capital and a massive African workforce, will the rest of the world be ready to compete?
That is a wild thought to end on. A local survival strategy today could literally become the dominant force in global trade tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep questioning the logistics and the quiet global shifts behind the products you buy. We'll catch you next time.